Morning, everyone. Follow that, as they say. Right, I'm going to play a quick game before we start. Some of you have played it before, so if you have, don't answer. I'm going to give you two figures, 13.4% and 3.6%. Does anybody have any idea what those figures represent? Wild guess. They're economic contribution figures. Would you care to guess which two industries they represent? Anybody? Oil is one. Banking is not the other. 3.6% is the motor manufacturing industry, which is, as you know, the British government's current poster child in respect of economic contribution and innovation into the United Kingdom. Whereas oil and gas, at 13.4% gross value added contribution, is by about 4% the largest contributor to the British economy. So you've got an awful lot to be proud of, and a very, very good story to tell, which we're going to get into in a moment. Now, this project began probably about a year ago, in earnest, when we started to conduct some research amongst people who seemed to think that this was a dying industry. And these are people who were existing mostly in Scotland and in London, places that you'd think people would know and have some information about the contribution of your industry. It seemed to them that at some point we'd forgotten to retell the story of what a vibrant industry this is and what a fine collective future that you've got. So we started discussing potentially how we could begin to remind them of that. So I want to discuss briefly why reputation matters, and I think I'm not going to spend too long on that because Andrew's pretty much told that story. I'm going to talk about two groups that we think are particularly important in telling the story to. Then we're going to say why we want to be proud in oil and gas. We want to use this campaign to really energize everybody in the industry, all the way down the supply chain of 440,000 employees throughout the United Kingdom, to kind of extract from them their human stories of their participation in this industry, of their contribution, and use that then externally to run a campaign that is about energizing the nation's future. So why reputation matters? Well, Andrew touched quite a lot on this. I mean, reputation is, in fact, the sum of what all your stakeholders, whomever they may be, think and say about you. And, of course, what people think and say about you is a reflection often of perception. And believe it or not, I know you'll find this very hard to believe, politicians are influenced by perception. And why is that important? Because politicians literally have managed your license to do business, operationally, and as you've found to your cost on occasion in recent years, fiscally too. So it's important that they are influenced correctly. And politicians, as we've seen, need industries to champion. Now, you guys have made some great strides in respect of that. I mean, I think it was March 28th, Vince Cable announced the industry strategy, at which he was congratulating you on your economic contribution. So you're starting to make strides. That needs to be consolidated amongst the political classes and the regulators, and make sure that you continue to tell them that story. So we need to think carefully about whose perceptions matter most and what it takes to make them think well of you. And if you think about this, say we've got to tell our industry story throughout the United Kingdom, it feels like a very large challenge to reach the general public. It feels like something that you can't really bite off as a manageable task. But I reckon that there is a way that you can do that by narrowing your focus and concentrating on two particular groups. The first group are what we call special publics, and these are politicians and the people that serve them, so special advisors and so forth. They're civil servants. You need to target specialist media and commentators, and you need to target academics in the field. These are the people who govern the license to operate business. You need to speak to them directly. You need to speak to them consistently because political establishments change and there's an awful lot of churn. So you must constantly speak, as Andrew said, with one voice and consistently tell your story. But, as we've talked about, those kinds of people are influenced by the general public. But we think they're influenced, actually, by a quite narrow strand of the general public that we call engaged Britons. Now, these are the 10% of people that can be sometimes characterized as the pub bore. They're active in the community, they're leaders, they're digitally enabled, they're knowledgeable and trend conscious, they're advice givers and seekers, so they're the ones that influence opinion, as it were, up to the politicians and then down to people in their communities. It's about 10% of the population. We're able to identify them by the media that they consume so we can reach them with our messages. And suddenly this begins to feel like a much more manageable task in scale. And because we know the media they consume, we can begin to reach out to them. So, what we did was to spend a lot of time interviewing people in the industry to try to figure out what the story of the industry is, the richness that you've got to tell at the moment. And we think that you've got three great strands of message. Well, obviously you've got the economic contribution at 13.4% gross value added. But to refresh this industry that was originally given a shelf life of about 25 years, and now you've got the same again and probably more, you're constantly innovating, constantly investing in research and development, constantly taking risks with your investment. So we've got to tell that story too. And in the process, you wouldn't be able to do it without developing a tremendously skilled workforce. So you've got a tremendously rich story to tell there. If you think about it in simple public relations terms, key messages. These are the platforms, the message areas that we want to use and develop as we reach out and tell our story to the engaged Britons and in turn to the special publics. So what was our strategy here? Like all strategies, it's simple. We want to have a renewed commitment to industry-wide external communication. We're going to tell your story consistently of economic contribution, innovation and skilled job creation. We've got to continue to take a strong position on energy policy issues, particularly in respect of energy security. Work, as Andrew said, with a collective voice. It's no good if individual companies go to government with different agendas, because politicians, as those of you who work with them know, like nothing better than inconsistency, because it's the get-out clause. I don't need to act because your colleague over here has an entirely different position. So speak with the collective voice on the issues that matter most, and tell your story consistently and systematically to engage Britons, probably for the first time. And how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to challenge and redress misconceptions, underline your vital contribution to the UK, demonstrate the breadth and reach of your supply chain. It was a real surprise to me when I began working with the industry, just how geographically rich you are. These 440,000 jobs down the supply chain reach throughout the United Kingdom, but when you ask people without any prior knowledge about their perceptions of your industry, well, clearly it's on a rig off the east coast of Scotland, rather than something much more rich and diverse than that. So that's a myth that we've got to bust. And we're going to promote the world-leading skills and innovation underpinned by the industry and its workforce. So, what do we want to generate? We actually want to get the whole industry active all the way down the supply chain and saying why I'm proud to be in oil and gas. We want to proudly and consistently tell your story of economic contribution, innovation and skilled job creation. Have you yet picked up the three key messages that we're hoping to promote? We want to capture the enthusiasm and excitement of companies and employees throughout the operating and supply chain. So we're going to be calling on you to give us, all the way down the supply chain, your stories about why you're proud to be in oil and gas. And we'll give you some guidance about that, so that we can capture the information we need to run an effective external briefing campaign, public relations campaign, perceptions management campaign. We've got to extract from the industry, per Andrew's presentation, the human and compelling stories that show where you work and the contribution you make in the communities that you live. And this is far more widespread than a rig pumping cash down a tax pipe to London, which is the current perception in some places. So, energizing the nation's future. What is it? It's going to be a branded campaign, as you'll see. It's going to be based on your stories, right? This is not just some piece of paper that gives you dry facts about the amount of money that you spend on production, about the numbers of people that you employ. It's got to be based in human compelling stories about the work you do, rather than facts. Andrew spoke about the burden of proof. Of course you need that to back all of this up. But anybody who works in communication knows that communication is first and foremost an emotional game. We're emotional people and we emote to reason. So we've got to figure out a way to create case studies and stories that trigger emotion, then wrap that up in language and communication that provokes that emotion and gets people then to the point of thinking that this is a positive industry for Great Britain. The campaign will be measured and evaluated so that we make sure that we're spending our money wisely, and it's going to be digitally enabled in the first instance. So, immediately after this breakfast, you'll all be getting an email. The email will point you to www.energizingthenationsfuture.co.uk. We want you to go immediately to this website. On the website, it will take you to, and by the way, there is a small incentive. If you sign up to our campaign, if you give us your proud to be in oil and gas stories, you could be one of 5 lucky winners over the next 5 months of a Samsung Galaxy tablet at enormous cost. So there is an incentive. But we're trying to extract from you stories. We're trying to extract from you experiences. And you'll see on that, you'll have access to all kinds of information that will help us integrate this campaign. If you register, you could win. It will allow us, hopefully, to integrate the campaign messages into your communication when you can. You can run your own promotional event using campaign materials. So the site allows you to access a campaign narrative, a set of key messages, a direction about the kinds of promotional events that you could run on behalf of your company. We're not here trying to burden you. We're just trying to give you a set of consistent messages that you can integrate into your activities that you already do so that we can speak with one voice consistently, we hope, and allow us then to really, really leverage up the possibilities afforded by such a big industry with so many employees across the whole of the country. So you can all act as a champion, an advocate for the industry. So sign up, register to win, and send us your stories at proud@oilandgas.co.uk. Thank you.